Oh hi, didn't see you there. I just finished a ride on Steel Vengeance, the world's best roller coaster.
Rocky Mountain Construction is just about every enthusiast's favorite child right now in the amusement industry. RMC made a name for themselves with their unique concept of taking old and mediocre to bad wooden coasters and converting them into ridiculous steel-tracked hybrid coasters. They really make these for enthusiasts, packing them with airtime, inversions, sideways airtime, and a lot of airtime. It's kinda overwhelming how much airtime they give, honestly. In just 10 short years, RMC has made themselves a household name. That is, if you own an amusement park or live with an absolute nerd like all the people watching this video. I mean, no offense guys, but you just clicked on a video called the RMC Dilemma, so... Now, if you could also click that little thumbs up button and the slightly bigger subscribe button. Okay, so yeah, RMC is really cool and all, but with that, a lot of enthusiasts have also started to really dislike the company. Whether this actually has solid reasoning behind it or not is up for debate.
Most of the time it does not, and they just want attention.
But it's hard to just ignore how many people share that sentiment. And it isn't just enthusiasts. Today, let's dig into the RMC Dilemma. What is it, or what are they, since there's a lot of points to be made in this video, and how will it affect the future of the company? Okay, as we get into this, I want to point out that this will be a fairly negative video since we are looking at the flaws of the company, but if you want to see another video about all their successes, let me know and perhaps that can be done. I should also mention that my number one is literally an RMC, so I definitely don't hate the coasters, they just could do some things better. Alright, with that out of the way, let's get into the first topic, which is simply the opinions of enthusiasts, where some, like Airtime Thrills, seem to think that RMC and Mr. Alan Schilke are the best thing since unsliced bread, and others look at Steel Vengeance and claim that there is no ejector on the ride.
That's the attention-seeking people, by the way.
So, what does each side have going for them? First up is the people who think RMC is perfection. In many cases, it's honestly hard to blame them. It's really easy to point and laugh at them for calling a very new manufacturer something so good, but when it comes down to it, RMC has made some of the world's best coasters and not a single bad one, at least that I've ridden. While they do have some flaws as a company that we'll get into later, you can't talk about RMC without mentioning that they may just be the kings of airtime right now. They have the coaster with more airtime than any other, and they have truly mastered the art of ejector in 10 years. However, the party against them also has some points to be made, so let me play devil's advocate and really get into where RMC falls short. We'll start with the objective stuff and then end with speculation. First up is the Cedar Fair mess. Six Flags was the main buyer of RMC's creations for a long time, but in 2018 Cedar Fair dropped the bombshell we'd all been waiting for, announcing the RMC conversion of Mean Streak at Cedar Point, Hurler at King's Dominion, and a new Raptor clone for California's Great America. For the most part, these additions would go over pretty well, with the exception of the biggest one. Steel Vengeance was something for sure. For one, it was one of the first coasters to use RMC's second generation iBox trains. They have some fancy name for them, but to be honest, I completely forget what it is, so Gen 2 is going to have to work. These trains, while they ride very smooth, are just not comfortable at all. But the trains are a whole nother issue, so let's focus just on Vengeance. Imagine Mean Streak, a coaster with barely any forces, keeping the same structure, and getting a super intense ride on top of it. It just doesn't work. A weak structure can't exactly support the stress of a steel monster on it, but I guess RMC didn't realize that somehow. This mistake resulted in Steel Vengeance's structure being incredibly shaky, to a point of being concerning. RMC has since come in and fixed the structure to make it much better, but it was a whole process and one that I'm sure Cedar Fair would have liked to avoid. But that wasn't the only issue that Vengeance had. It also bumped in the middle of opening day due to some questionable breaks. Again, not a massive deal in the long run, but something that would have been nicer to never go through at all. I find it really hard to blame Cedar Fair for not loving RMC with all the issues they've had with the company. I'm not sure if they'll never go back to RMC, but it's hard to ignore a coaster from them being so problematic when B&M is a super reliable and safe option. The next dilemma for RMC is their trains. This is a really frustrating con because it seems like they just can't get it perfect. Sure, they run fine and all, but the actual comfort? Yikes. They're not too small, but the restraints, especially on the Gen 2 trains, are super restrictive. They staple easily, but more so than that, they just hurt. I am tall, so that may play into it, but the shin guards force my legs into a super uncomfortable position that allows for no room whatsoever. Not to mention that in the Gen 2 trains specifically, every time I get airtime, my shins get pressed into the shin guards. I'm realizing suddenly that I said this was objective, and right now it really isn't, so let's get into that part. RMC is requiring all of their coasters to have seatbelts, and RMC seatbelts are not nice. They dig into your thighs and just bleh, bad. Would not recommend. They also feel very unnecessary with the super bulky lap bars, but I don't work at RMC, so I can't say what their reasoning is. In general, RMC trains bad. A nice train improvement could improve the rides as a whole by so much. Our next issue is going to relate to RMC's newest creation that has actually happened, the Raptor. This is arguably their most innovative concept to date, taking the intensity and airtime of everything people love about their iBox track coasters and converting it into a wild, single-file train, single-rail coaster. They built 2 of these in 2018, one at Fiesta, Texas, and one at California's Great America, and since then they have built 2 more. The first 2 were clones of each other, but both featured absolutely mental pacing and a ridiculous, out-of-control sequence of elements. Contrast that with the 2 they've built since then at Six Flags Great Adventure in Silverwood, and there is a clear difference in intensity. Do take this with a grain of salt, since the new ones have much longer trains than the first 2, but it is worth pointing out that they have become much more tame. Adding on to that, Six Flags Magic Mountain is adding a near clone of Six Flags Great Adventure's Raptor at their park, making it clear, at least for now, that the more chilled out Raptors may become the more normal thing to see. This whole sequence of events gives me big B&M vibes, where people praise the intensity of their older coasters and bully their newer creations for their lack of forces. Granted, Six Flags is cheap, so it's not shocking that they're cloning Jersey Devil for Magic Mountain, but the Raptors getting less crazy is still something to point out in my opinion, and it directly leads into my next point, which is that the longevity of RMCs may be in question at this time. Let me specify here, because I actually think iBox coasters will be fine. They have strong track, mostly strong structures, and generally not too many issues, so I'm not concerned about any of the conversions. However, if you look at Lightning Rod, they have already replaced the old Topper wooden track with new iBox track after not even 5 years. This really raises some questions about Topper track for me. I know they've already pretty much suspended it as an option, but how long do other Woodies like Goliath and Outlaw Run have? If it's wearing down that fast, surely they won't be wooden much longer. Is longevity perhaps the reason that the Raptors got more tame? After all, Stunt Pilot and Jersey Devil both had a fair bit of issues with their trains. Nothing is really confirmed here, but it is interesting that around the same time as they started toning down their elements, they have to RMC and RMC. And you know it had to have been bad, because Lightning Rod held wooden coaster records. I don't know, drop your thoughts in the comments because this is very interesting to me. The final point to be pointed out is actually a few points all compiled into one paragraph. Some objective-ish, some subjective-ish. Let's talk T-Rex. Everyone seems to freak out over this model for about 1 day per month and then forgets about it again. Why? Because it's very forgettable. RMC introduced this model with a piece of track, and it really grew popular when good old Peter of Theme Park Crazy had a fantastic interview with an RMC employee that claimed the RMC T-Rex could reach 500 feet. Despite this bold statement, no parks took the bait, and we have still seen no sign of an RMC T-Rex coming anytime soon. I've heard that RMC explicitly said that the T-Rex is dead for now, but I could be wrong. In general, it's a flop and not anything really against the company, but it is something that happened that didn't work in the company's favor. Moving on, we run into the fact that sometimes RMC layouts are not fantastic. Their elements get carried over from coaster to coaster, just in a slightly different order. They also can get very repetitive. If you need an example, then take a look at Steel Vengeance's second half and the recently announced Air Force One's final sequence of airtime hills. Like sure, they'll all give airtime, but in my opinion, getting the exact same airtime moment 4 times in a row with literally nothing dividing them up is really bland. Keep in mind that this is strongly based on opinion. If you love the quote-unquote quad down idea, then more power to you. Personally though, I'd love to see RMC branch out the way that we've seen Intamin and Mac do lately. Finally, is that RMC really only caters towards enthusiasts. Guest satisfaction for the coasters is definitely better than the original Woody they replaced in the conversions cases, but if we use Steel Vengeance as an example, it didn't hit 1 million riders through its first few years of operation, while every B&M in the park did. This can also be blamed on capacity and how unreliable they can be sometimes, but those are just more issues for RMC when compared to other companies. I can't say much else about how they go over at other parks that have installed an RMC of any kind, but I do know that they often aren't the most popular rides in the park. All this to say, RMC is still amazing. If we're being realistic, they're one of the best coaster manufacturers right now. They make amazing rides and mean well. They're proud of what they do and are happy to fix their mistakes, but you have to acknowledge their mistakes too, and I feel I've done that pretty well today. So like, subscribe, comment, whatever, goodbye.